The massive doors of the Galactic Military Academy opened with a soft hiss. Cadet Hansol stepped through them, her boots making heavy thuds against the polished floor. The sound echoed through the empty hall, making several alien officers turn their heads in surprise. Senior Sergeant First Class Nexus stood at his desk, his four eyes widening as he watched the security scanner's readings. The numbers made no sense. The human female walking toward him had bone density readings that should have made walking impossible, yet she moved with easy grace. Cadet Hansol reporting for duty, sir. Her voice was clear and strong, but not too loud. Still, several nearby alien cadets winced at what they considered a shout. Nexus checked his datapad again. You're the human. He tried to hide his disbelief. The Academy had never admitted a Deathworlder before. How could they? The gravity alone in most of the training areas would crush a normal being. Yes, sir. First human cadet accepted to the Academy, sir. Hansol stood straight, her posture perfect. She was shorter than most of the alien cadets, but something about her seemed to fill more space than her size suggested. Your medical readings cannot be correct, Nexus said, tapping his screen. According to this, your muscle density would allow you to lift 300 standard units, sir. That's normal for a human my size. Hansol's face remained serious, but her eyes showed a hint of amusement. She had seen this reaction before. The other cadets in the room started whispering. A nearby instructor dropped her datapad. 300 standard units was enough to lift a small shuttlecraft. Nexus walked around his desk, his long legs carrying him in a smooth glide. He circled Hansol, studying her. And you can survive in, let me see, Type 4 atmospheric conditions. Type 1 through 6, sir. Earth's varying conditions prepared us for most environments. Hansol didn't move as Nexus circled her, but her eyes tracked his movement. The sergeant noticed her quick, precise eye movements. More impossibilities. Impossible, one of the alien cadets whispered. No species can survive that range. Nexus raised one of his upper hands for silence. Cadet Hansol, proceed to the physical evaluation chamber. Let's see if these readings match your actual performance. Hansol picked up her bag, which weighed as much as a small alien child, with one hand and walked toward the evaluation chamber. The other cadets quickly moved out of her way. Inside the chamber, automated systems began their work. Scanners hummed, and holographic displays filled with data. Hansol stood calmly as machines measured everything from her reaction time to her bone structure. Fascinating, said Assistant Instructor Rail, who had just entered the room. Her cellular structure. It's like nothing we've seen before. The density, the efficiency. He moved closer to the displays, his thin fingers dancing over the controls. Run the gravity test, Nexus ordered. The floor beneath Hansol began to glow. The gravity increased slowly, reaching twice normal levels. Hansol didn't move. 3 times. 4 times. She shifted her weight slightly, but remained standing. Impossible, Rail whispered. At this gravity, her bones should be crushed. Hansol suggested helpfully. Earth's gravity varies a lot. We adapt. Nexus checked his instruments again. Everything worked perfectly, yet nothing made sense. This human, this Deathworlder, stood calmly under pressures that would flatten most beings. Welcome to the Academy, Cadet Hansol, Nexus finally said. He tried to keep his voice steady, professional. Report to Barracks 7 for assignment. And he paused, all 4 eyes fixed on her. We will be watching your progress with great interest. Hansol saluted, turned with military precision, and walked out. Her footsteps echoed again, each one a reminder of the impossible being that had just joined their ranks. After she left, Rail turned to Nexus. Sir, should we inform the Science Division? Nexus was still staring at the door. Inform everyone. Rail. I have a feeling we're about to learn that everything we know about physical limitations might be wrong. The morning sun of Centauri Prime cast 3 shadows across the Academy's training grounds. Hansol stood at the start of the obstacle course, her fellow cadets keeping a careful distance from her. The whispers had not stopped since her arrival 2 weeks ago. "Cadet Hansol," Sergeant Nexus called out, "demonstrate the standard course completion for your classmates." His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he activated his recording devices. The science division had demanded detailed documentation of all human physical activities. Hansol looked at the course ahead. To her, it seemed simple enough, a series of walls, ropes, and barriers. But she noticed the gravity generators humming beneath each section. They would make things more interesting. "Beginning demonstration, sir," she said. Then she moved. The first wall was 3 times her height. The other cadets usually used gravity manipulators to scale it. Hansol simply ran toward it, her legs pumping with power that made the ground crack slightly beneath her feet. She jumped. "Impossible," Assistant Instructor Rail shouted, checking his instruments. "The gravity field is at triple strength." Hansol cleared the wall in 1 leap. She landed on the other side with grace that seemed to deny the extra gravitational force trying to pull her down. Without pausing, she sprinted toward the rope climb. The ropes hung over a pit of high-density gas, meant to slow falls and make climbing more challenging. Hansol grabbed the first rope and began to climb. Her movements were quick and efficient, each pull taking her higher despite the increasing gravity. "Sir," one of the monitoring technicians called out, "her muscle output readings are exceeding our measurement capabilities." Nexus watched as Hansol reached the top of the rope course. The next obstacle was a series of platforms floating in an anti-gravity field. Most cadets took time to adjust to the sudden lack of gravity. Hansol didn't hesitate. She pushed off from her platform, her body rotating with perfect control. Each movement was precisely calculated, using the minimal force needed to reach the next platform. The other cadets watched in silence as she made the supposedly difficult crossing look like a simple dance. "The human is not using any stabilization equipment," Rail noted, his voice filled with disbelief. "How is she maintaining orientation in zero gravity?" The final obstacle was an endurance run through varying gravity fields. Hansol's feet touched the track, and she began to run. The gravity shifted randomly, from nearly 0 to 5 times normal. Her stride never faltered. "This defies every physical law we know," one of the senior instructors muttered. "She's adapting to gravity changes faster than our instruments can record them." Hansol crossed the finish line with a time that broke every academy record. Her breathing was slightly faster than normal, but otherwise she showed no signs of exertion. She turned and saluted Sergeant Nexus. "Course completed, sir," she reported calmly. Nexus looked at his data pad, then at Hansol, then back at his data pad. "Cadet, do you understand what you just did?" "Completed the standard obstacle course, sir," Hansol replied. She noticed all the staring eyes and added, "Was my performance unsatisfactory?" "Unsatisfactory." Rail laughed, a strange whistling sound. "You just did what our physics equations say is impossible. Multiple times." Hansol looked confused. "Sir, I held back as instructed. Should I run it again at full capacity?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the Academy's ever-present machinery seemed to pause. Nexus finally found his voice. That was you holding back?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Earth's gravity varies much more extremely in some regions. We adapt from childhood." Nexus turned to his fellow instructors. "Update all training protocols. We need to rethink everything we know about physical limitations." He looked back at Hansol. "And Cadet, tomorrow, show us what you can really do." Hansol smiled, and for the first time, her alien classmates didn't step back in fear. Instead, they moved closer, eager to learn more about this fascinating Deathworlder who made the impossible look easy. Professor Du Young stood in his laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing Hansol's training data. The human physicist had arrived at the Galactic Military Academy 3 months ago, and now he faced the most interesting puzzle of his career. "Play the gravity chamber recording again," he said to his computer. The hologram showed Hansol performing what the aliens called impossible feats. Du Young saw something different. He saw patterns. The door slid open, and Sergeant Nexus entered the lab. "Professor, have you found anything that explains the human cadet's abilities?" Do Young pointed to one of the displays. "Look at these energy readings. When Hansol moves, she's not fighting against gravity. She's working with it." "That's impossible," Nexus said, but he had learned to be careful with that word around humans. Gravity cannot be worked with. It can only be resisted or avoided. The professor smiled and walked to another display. "That's what we thought about Earth too. But our planet taught us differently." He brought up an image of Earth's gravity map. "See these variations? Humans evolved in a world where gravity changes constantly." Nexus moved closer to the display, his 4 eyes focusing on different parts of the map. "These variations are extreme. No civilized world has such unstable conditions." "Exactly," Du Young said. "Earth isn't a civilized world by galactic standards. It's what you call a death world. But these conditions forced us to adapt in ways your sciences never considered possible." The door opened again. Hansol entered, still in her training uniform. "You wanted to see me, Professor." "Yes, Cadet. I need to test a theory." Du Young adjusted some controls on his desk. "Can you feel the gravity variations in this room?" Hansol closed her eyes for a moment. "Yes, sir. There are 3 different fields. One is standard, one is about twice that, and there's a pocket of near-zero gravity in the corner." Nexus checked his instruments in surprise. "The variations are less than 1%. How can she sense them?" "Because that's how we survived on Earth," Du Young explained. "Our bodies don't just resist gravity. We develop the ability to sense and use gravitational fields." He turned to Hansol. "Cadet, please demonstrate a standard Earth walking technique across these fields." Hansol walked across the room. To Nexus, it looked like normal walking, but the instruments told a different story. Her body was making thousands of tiny adjustments with each step, perfectly matching the changing gravitational fields. "Remarkable," Nexus whispered. "She's not breaking physics. She's using physics we never knew existed," Du Young finished. He brought up new displays showing Hansol's cellular structure. "Look here. Human cells can store and release gravitational potential energy. We don't fight against gravity. We store it, redirect it, use it." Hansol watched the displays with interest. "Is that why we were told to hold back in training? Because we're using gravity differently?" "Exactly," Du Young said. "What seems impossible to others is simply how we naturally move. Our bodies learn to dance with gravity instead of fighting it." Nexus studied the data carefully. "This changes everything we thought we knew about physical training, about space travel, about..." He paused. "About what's possible." "No," Du Young corrected gently. "It changes what you thought was impossible." He looked at Hansol with pride. "We humans never learned those limits. That's why we can break them." Hansol smiled. "Should I show them what else we can do, Professor?" "Yes," Du Young said, activating all his recording devices. "It's time to teach the galaxy that sometimes the best way to handle impossible things is to not know they're impossible in the first place." The Academy's main conference room was silent except for the soft hum of environmental systems. Commander Jin-A sat at the head of the long table, reading the application in front of her. Around the table, alien instructors watched her with varying degrees of concern. "Cadet Hansol has applied for the annual survival course," Commander Jin-A said, her voice calm and measured. The words caused several instructors to shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Commander, with respect," Sergeant Nexus began, "the survival course is designed for standard atmosphere species. The environmental conditions alone would kill most beings." Jin-A placed the application on the table. "Cadet Hansol's test results suggest she can handle the conditions. Professor Do Young's research supports this." Assistant Instructor Rail activated a holographic display in the center of the table. The course includes regions of extreme heat, toxic atmosphere, and gravity fluctuations that exceed even Earth's variations. No Deathworlder has ever attempted it. Perhaps, Jin A said, that is exactly why one should. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the training grounds where Hansol was currently running drills with other cadets. The door opened, and Professor Do Young entered with new data readings. "Commander, I've completed the simulation results." He placed a data crystal on the table. According to these calculations, not only can Hansol survive the course, she might set new records. "Impossible," one of the senior instructors said, then quickly corrected himself. "I mean, the course was designed to be impossibly difficult, even for our most advanced species." Jin A turned back to face the room. When humans say something is impossible, we tend to view it as a challenge to be overcome. Cadet Hansol has demonstrated this trait repeatedly. The holographic display changed to show Hansol's latest training results. Her performance numbers were far beyond what the Academy considered possible. Even more surprisingly, they were still improving. "There is another factor to consider," Professor Do Young added. "Hansol's presence here has already changed how we understand physical limitations. Imagine what we might learn from her attempt at the survival course." Sergeant Nexus studied the data carefully. "The risks are significant if something goes wrong." "I will take full responsibility," Commander Jin A stated firmly. "As both a human and a commander of this academy, I believe we have an opportunity here. Not just for Hansol, but for all species." The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. Finally, Sergeant Nexus spoke. "Very well. But I recommend we adjust the safety protocols. If a human can truly survive these conditions, our current emergency measures might be insufficient." "Agreed," Jin A said. She pressed a button on the table, and the door opened again. Hansol entered, standing at attention. "Cadet Hansol," Commander Jin A announced, "your application for the annual survival course has been approved." Hansol's expression remained professional, but her eyes showed excitement. "Thank you, Commander. When do I begin preparation?" "Immediately," Professor Do Young said. "We'll need to document everything. Your performance could revolutionize our understanding of survival training." As Hansol left the room, Commander Jin A turned to the assembled instructors. "Gentlemen, we are about to witness either the most impressive achievement in Academy history or learn the true limits of human capability. Either way, we will learn something valuable." Sergeant Nexus watched through the window as Hansol returned to her training. "Commander," he said quietly, "what if there are no true limits to human capability?" Jin A smiled. "Then, Sergeant, we will have to rewrite every textbook in the galaxy." The training room's reinforced walls gleamed under the bright lights as Hansol practiced her survival course movements. She stopped when she heard the door open. A tall human male walked in, wearing the standard cadet uniform. "Cadet Ta Wu reporting," he said, saluting. "Commander Jin A said I would find you here." Hansol returned the salute. "Welcome to the Academy. You're just in time to help me prepare for the survival course." Sergeant Nexus entered behind Ta Wu, carrying his ever-present datapad. "Cadet Ta Wu scored even higher than you did on the physical tests." "Cadet Hansol, I believe you two can learn from each other." Hansol looked at Ta Wu with new interest. "Good. I could use a training partner who won't break when I hit at full strength." The two humans moved to the center of the training room. Nexus activated the gravity controls, starting with twice normal gravity. Neither human seemed to notice the change. "Show me what you've got," Hansol said, taking a fighting stance. "I need to practice in extreme conditions." Ta Wu nodded and moved. His speed surprised even Hansol. They began sparring, their movements becoming faster as they adjusted to each other's styles. The gravity increased to 3 times normal, then 4. Remarkable. Nexus. The morning of the survival course dawned with all 3 of Centauri Prime's suns casting their light on the Academy grounds. Hansol stood at the entrance to the course, her specialized environment suit gleaming under the triple sunlight. Commander Jin'e addressed the gathered crowd of instructors and cadets. Today, we witnessed the first human attempt at the annual survival course. All safety protocols have been upgraded, and monitoring systems are in place. Professor Du Young checked Hansol's suit readings one last time. Remember, the course is designed to be impossible. But that's never stopped humans before. Hansol nodded, her face showing calm determination. I'm ready, Professor. The first section of the course began with a chamber of extreme heat. The temperature rose to levels that would melt standard environmental suits. Hansol moved through it as if she were taking a walk in a park. Impossible, one of the alien instructors whispered. The heat should be affecting her movement speed. Her suit readings are normal, Sergeant Nexus reported, watching the data stream. She's actually cooling herself by using the gravity fluctuations to create air movement around her suit. The next challenge was the toxic atmosphere zone. Instead of rushing through it, Hansol took her time, moving with precise efficiency. The watching crowd held their breath as she navigated the poisonous environment. 15 minutes in the toxic zone, Rail announced, his voice showing disbelief. She hasn't even activated her emergency oxygen supply yet. In the control room, Ta Wu watched the monitors closely. She's using the breathing techniques we practiced. Her oxygen consumption is minimal. The course's gravity challenge came next. The field shifted randomly between 0 gravity and 5 times normal. Hansol's movements changed with each shift, but she never slowed down. She used the gravity changes to increase her speed, letting the stronger pulls accelerate her movements. Look at these readings, Professor Du Young said excitedly. She's not fighting the gravity changes. She's predicting them, using them to her advantage. The final challenge was a combination of all previous obstacles. Heat, toxic air, and changing gravity created conditions that the course designers had considered unsurvivable. Hansol entered this section without hesitation. Commander Jin'e leaned forward in her chair. How is she maintaining such precise control in these conditions? Because she's not trying to survive the conditions, Ta Wu explained. She's working with them, just like we do on Earth. Our world taught us that fighting nature is pointless. Working with it is the key. Hansol reached the end of the course. The timer stopped, and for a moment, complete silence fell over the academy grounds. Then Professor Du Young's voice broke through. She didn't just complete the course, he announced, his voice filled with awe. She set a new record, not just for humans, for any species that has ever attempted it. Hansol removed her helmet, her face showing only a light sheen of sweat. Permission to submit suggestions for increasing course difficulty, Commander? She asked, a small smile playing on her lips. Commander Jin'e laughed. Of course you would ask that. She turned to the stunned audience. Today, we witnessed more than just a course completion. We saw the future of what's possible when we stop limiting ourselves with our own expectations. Sergeant Nexus approached Hansol, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Cadet, you didn't just survive this course. You made it look easy. That's because it was easy, sir, Hansol replied. Once you understand that the impossible is just something no one has done yet. The Great Hall of the Galactic Science Council stretched high above Professor Du Young's head. Thousands of the galaxy's most respected scientists filled the seats, their attention fixed on the human standing at the center platform. Distinguished members of the council, Du Young began, his voice clear and strong. Today I present evidence that will change our understanding of physics forever. The main display screen showed Hansol's survival course performance. The council members watched in silence as the human cadet moved through conditions they had always considered lethal. For generations, we believed certain physical laws were absolute, Du Young continued. We were wrong. Humans didn't break these laws. We discovered they were never complete to begin with. He brought up new data showing human cellular structure. Our bodies evolved on a world you call a death world. Earth's harsh conditions forced us to adapt in ways your sciences never imagined possible. An elder council member stood up. Are you suggesting that all our physical theories are incorrect, Professor? Not incorrect, Du Young replied with a gentle smile. Incomplete. Just as Newton's laws were enhanced by Einstein's discoveries, your understanding of physics needs to expand to include what humans have learned through evolution. The display changed to show detailed scans of Hansel during her training. Look at how human cells interact with gravitational fields. We don't just resist gravity. We store it, redirect it, use it. This isn't magic or strange technology. It's natural adaptation. The council chamber filled with excited whispers. Scientists from 100 worlds began discussing the implications. Du Young waited for them to quiet down before continuing. But this discovery goes beyond just human capabilities, he said. Think about what this means for space travel, for colonization, for survival in extreme environments. What humans can do naturally, we can teach others to do through technology. Commander Jin'e, who had been sitting quietly in the audience, stood up. The military academy has already begun developing new training programs based on our observations of human cadets. The results are promising. Do Young nodded his thanks to her and turned back to the council. This is why I'm not just presenting a paper today. I'm proposing a new branch of physics, one that studies how living beings can adapt to and work with fundamental forces instead of just trying to overcome them. The head of the council raised all four of his hands for silence. Professor Du Young, what you're suggesting would require rewriting centuries of scientific knowledge. Yes, Du Young agreed. Just as humans had to rewrite our own understanding of what's possible when we first reached for the stars. Change is never easy, but it is necessary for growth. He showed one final image, Han Sol and Ta Wu training together, moving in ways that seemed to defy gravity itself. Humans don't accept impossible as an answer. We see it as a challenge, a puzzle to be solved. Now we invite the galaxy to solve these puzzles with us. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Scientists from every world wanted to start research immediately. Du Young watched with satisfaction as centuries of impossible beliefs began to crumble. They're ready, Commander Jin'e said quietly, standing beside him. Ready to learn that the universe is more wonderful and strange than they ever imagined. No, Du Young corrected gently. They're ready to learn that they themselves are more wonderful and strange than they ever imagined. That's the real revolution. 6 months after Professor Do Young's presentation to the Galactic Science Council, the Galactic Military Academy looked very different. The graduation ceremony was about to begin, and the Great Hall was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Han Sol stood at attention in her formal uniform, the first of many medals gleaming on her chest. Behind her, a new class of cadets watched, not just humans now, but beings from 50 different worlds, all training under the new protocols she had helped create. Commander Jin'e approached the podium. When Cadet Hansel first arrived at our academy, we thought we knew the limits of what was possible. She taught us that limits exist only in our minds. The commander gestured to the training grounds visible through the giant windows. There, cadets of all species practiced in varying gravity fields, using techniques adapted from human methods. What had once seemed impossible was now becoming standard training. Today, we don't just celebrate our first human honor graduate, Jin'e continued. We celebrate a new understanding of what any being can achieve when they stop accepting impossible as an answer. Sergeant Nexus stepped forward, his formal uniform displaying new insignia marking him as the head of the Academy's Revolutionary Training Division. Cadet Hansel, step forward for your final evaluation. Hansel moved to stand before him. The surgeon's 4 eyes looked at her with what could only be described as pride. When you first arrived, Nexus said, I told you we would be watching your progress with great interest. I had no idea we would end up rewriting every training manual in the galaxy. He handed her a data crystal, her graduation certificate, and new assignment. You have earned the highest honors this academy has ever awarded, not just for your physical achievements, but for showing us that the impossible is just a word for something we haven't learned yet. Professor Du Young watched from his seat, surrounded by scientists from dozens of worlds. His new physics research center was already making breakthrough discoveries, all based on understanding how humans had evolved to work with natural forces instead of against them. Cadet Hansol, Commander Jin'ei announced, "You have set new standards that will guide generations of future officers. What do you have to say to those who will follow in your footsteps?" Hansol looked at the assembled cadets, her voice clear and strong. "Remember that every world teaches its children different truths about what's possible. Listen to those truths. Learn from them, but never let them limit you." Tai Wu, now a senior instructor for the new training programs, nodded in agreement. He had helped transform the Academy's approach to teaching, showing how human adaptability could be understood and partially replicated by other species. As Hansol received her graduation honors, Sergeant Nexus leaned close to Commander Jin'ei. "Did you ever imagine, when you approved her application for the survival course, that it would lead to all this?" Jin'ei smiled. "I imagined that we would learn something valuable. I never dreamed we would learn to remake our understanding of the entire universe." The ceremony ended with a demonstration by the new cadet class. Beings of all species moved through training exercises that would have been considered lethal just months ago. They didn't match human capabilities exactly, but they achieved things their peoples had long thought impossible. "And this is just the beginning," Hansol said quietly, watching the demonstration. "Just wait until they learn what else humans can do." Professor Do Young overheard her and laughed. "My dear, I don't think the galaxy is ready for that yet. Let them adjust to these impossible things first. Then we can show them the really interesting stuff."